History is full of the lovers of the rich and powerful. Some were content to stay in the background, but others had grander ambitions. Many of the lovers of rulers and royalty used their positions to line their own pockets and seeking advancement. These women and men used their sexual allure to acquire wealth and status. Many helped elevate their friends or themselves into positions of power. Some even ascended through ennoblement or marriage. For many, the gamble paid off. These lovers achieved political and cultural influence, titles, and wealth. Some even ascended the throne themselves or founded royal dynasties. For others, the achievement was survival. However, for every lover who succeeded, some lost out. Some lost their wealth and influence, others their lives. Here are 20 of the most successful and not so successful lovers in history. Number 20. King David tried to cast Bathsheba off when she became pregnant, but she went on to become his wife and the mother of one of the Bible's most famous kings. According to Samuel 2, King David became smitten with Bathsheba when he spied her bathing from his palace roof. Undeterred by the fact Bathsheba was married to Uriah the Hittite, the king began an affair with her. Then she became pregnant. David initially tried to distance himself from Bathsheba, attempting to pass the child off as her husband's. He recalled Uriah from the army hoping he would sleep with his wife. But Uriah refused because of his warrior's code of abstaining from sex before battle, so David had Uriah killed and married Bathsheba. Although this first child died, the canny Bathsheba maneuvered her subsequent son to supplant David's elder sons to become King Solomon. Number 19. Aspasia of Miletus acted as advisor to her lover, the Greek statesman Pericles, and may even have written his speeches. Aspasia of Miletus became the lover of the great ancient Greek statesman Pericles when she left her birthplace to set up as a courtesan in Athens. Sometime in the mid-5th century BC, Pericles became so enamored by Aspasia that after he parted from his wife in 440 BC, he moved her into his home. Pericles could not marry Aspasia as she was not an Athenian citizen, but the couple had a son who Pericles later legitimized. Aspasia was much more than Pericles' lover, educated and intelligent. She exerted considerable influence over her lover, advising him on political and military matters and reputedly even writing his speeches. Aspasia is rumored to have written Pericles' most famous oratory, the funeral oration delivered during the Peloponnesian War. Number 18. Liyue was the toy boy lover of a queen who attempted a coup against the first emperor of China. During the 3rd century BC, a young man called Liyue caught the eye of the Dowager Queen of Qin, one of the states that later became part of China. The queen was so enamored with Liyue that she had him disguised as a eunuch and sneaked him into her court. However, Liyue was not content to remain the queen's plaything. After using his influence to acquire great wealth and position, he attempted to seize power. Liyue conspired with the regent of Qin, Liu Bovai, to overthrow the young king Qin Shi Huang. However, the plot failed and Liyue executed in 238 BC. As for the young king who had evaded the coup, he went on to become the first emperor of China. Number 17. Byzantine Empress Euphemia began as a prostitute and changed her name when she ascended the throne. In the 6th century AD, an ex-sex worker managed to become Empress of the Eastern Roman Empire. For the wife of Julian I, Empress Euphemia began life as a woman known as Lupacina. The Latin word lupa refers to female wolves and prostitutes, so the name Lupacina suggests Euphemia started life as a prostitute. In his secret history, the writer Procopius even suggests Euphemia was a slave, whatever her past. Once Empress, Euphemia became intensely pious. She did not involve herself in politics, but she did direct Julian's religious policies. Her new name was even that of a Christian martyr. Euphemia founded a church to her namesake, the Church of Saint Euphemia in Constantinople, where she lay after her death around 524 AD. Number 16. Empress Theodore used her position to try and improve women's rights. Euphemia was succeeded as Empress of the Eastern Empire by Theodora, wife of the Emperor Justinian, famed for the Justinian legal code. Like Euphemia, Theodora came from a less than exalted background. Her father was a trainer of wild beasts used in the arena. Theodora herself started her career as an actress. However, she was employed in the less glamorous trade as a wool spinner when she caught Justinian's eye. Theodora became his mistress. She later became his wife after a special law allowed the future emperor could marry an ex-actress. As Empress, Theodora was a much more political animal than her predecessor. She served as Justinian's right hand, negotiating foreign policy and suppressing rebellions as well as attempting to improve women's rights. Number 15. Freya Gund. the servant who murdered her way to become Frankish queen and inadvertently united the Franks. 6th century Frankish king Chilperic I of Soissons had several queen consorts. None, however, were quite like his third wife, Freya Gund. Freya Gund was Chilperic's servant before she was his lover. But being the king's mistress was not enough for her, so the ambitious Freya Gund began to plot her way to the throne. Initially, she persuaded Chilperic to abandon his first wife, Audivera, but when Chilperic married Galswinthe, a member of another Frankish royal house, Freya Gund settled on extreme measures, persuading Chilperic to murder Galswinthe. Freya Gund and Chilperic then finally married, and the new queen consolidated her power by killing her stepchildren. In 584 AD, 3 months before Chilperic's death, Freya Gund gave birth to his son, Clotaire II, who was to unite the Frankish kingdoms eventually. Number 14. Alice Perez interfered so much, the English Parliament passed a law forbidding women from practicing in the law courts. In 1366, the elderly Edward III of England surprised his court by taking up with a younger woman after years of devotion to his wife. The lady in question was 18-year-old Alice Perez, a former lady-in-waiting to the now-dying Queen Philippa. Edward supposedly became enamored with Alice because of her brains and wit. She certainly wielded considerable influence over her older lover and made the most of it. During their time together, Edward awarded Alice wealth and lands, and she used her power to help her friends in the law courts. Alice's legal adventures so incensed the royal family and parliament that in 1376 Alice was banished, and a law passed banning women from practicing law. Number 13. Agnes Bernard's death inspired a war between father and son. In 1428, the heir to the Duchy of Bavaria met a young woman named Agnes Bernard at a tournament. Albert was immediately smitten, even though Agnes was only the daughter of an Augsburg barber. He may have secretly married her. A marriage to someone of such lowly origins could undoubtedly explain why Albert's father, Ernst, Duke of Bavaria, went to the lengths he did to remove Agnes from his son's life. In October 1435, while Albert was hunting, the Duke had Agnes arrested, condemned for witchcraft and drowned in the river Danube. A war between the grief-stricken Albert and his father was narrowly averted. However, Albert never forgot Agnes and instituted an annual perpetual mass in her memory, which is still said annually. Number 12. Agnes Sorel was the first acknowledged mistress of a French king. Until the 15th century, kings' mistresses in France were distinctly low-key. Then, in 1444, a minor noblewoman named Agnes Sorel caught the eye of Charles VII at the Festival of Nancy. Charles is best remembered by history for securing his throne with the help of Joan of Arc. Charles was captivated with Agnes, installing her in his bed and showering her with estates and wealth. However, he also awarded her with a title that had not previously existed. When he made Agnes Sorel the first acknowledged mistress of a king of France, this title was no empty one, for the position of royal mistress gave Agnes a semi-official role in Charles' court. The thought of a royal mistress potentially wielding political power did not sit well with Charles's courtiers. In 1450, Agnes died from dysentery, reputedly from poison. Number 11. Beltran de la Cueva's supposed affair with a queen gave Isabella of Castile her throne. Beltran de la Cueva was one of the favorite courtiers of King Henry IV of Castile. He was also reputed to have had an affair with Henry's second wife, Joan of Portugal, the mother of the king's only child, Juana. After Henry's death, his half-sister Isabella claimed the throne of Castile because Juana was not Henry's child but Beltran's. Rumors had long suggested that Beltran was Juana's father because Henry was supposedly impotent. A 4-year war ensued with Isabella emerging triumphant, but despite losing and the continued rumors about her parentage, Juana continued to sign her letters using the title Queen. Number 10. Julia Farnese became the lover of a pope and set her brother on the road to the papal throne. Julia Farnese was a 15th Italian noblewoman of the Farnese family who became the mistress of Pope Alexander VI, known as Julia la Bella or Julia the Beautiful. Julia was married to Orsino Orsini when her affair with the Borgia Pope began. However, it seems the relationship had full family support. Orsino's stepmother was also Pope Alexander's cousin. She encouraged Julia's affair, hoping it would further her stepson's career. For East, Julia moved into a palace next door to the Vatican with the Pope's daughter, Lucrezia. However, it was Giulia's brother Alessandro who benefited most from the liaison. He became a cardinal in 1493, setting him well on the road to his eventual inauguration as Pope Paul III. Number 9. Diane de Poitiers poisoned herself slowly to keep her younger lover, the King of France. 15th century French noblewoman, Diane de Poitiers was a celebrated beauty before she became the lover of Henri II, King of France. Diana was 20 years older than Henri. She was in attendance at his birth and even acted as one of the king's tutors. Perhaps this was why, once Henri's mistress, Diane worked so hard to hold her lover's attention, possibly poisoning herself in the process. Diane reputedly drank a gold elixir to keep her youth that was so successful that when she died aged 66, Diane's beauty still intact. However, scientists have found that the potion was what probably killed her, as her remains show signs of gold poisoning. Number 8. Bessie Blunt was Henry VIII's first known mistress and the mother of his son. Bessie Blunt was Henry VIII's first documented mistress. Their affair was inconsequential in itself. But, before Jane Seymour, Bessie was the only woman to bear the king a living son. Bessie arrived at court when she was a teenager in 1515 and caught Henry's eye. How soon after their affair began cannot be said with certainty. But by 1518, she was pregnant. Bessie was taken from the court by Thomas Wolsey, gave birth in an Augustan priory to Henry Fitzroy, the king's only acknowledged, illegitimate child. Henry fully acknowledged the child, making him Duke of Somerset and Richmond. As for Bessie, she was quietly moved on and was married to Gilbert Talboys in 1522. Number 7. Mary Boleyn may not have kept Henry VIII's favor, but at least she kept her head. Bessie's successor in Henry VIII's bed was none other than his future sister-in-law, Mary Boleyn, in 1520. Mary married Henry's gentleman of the Privy Chamber, William Carey, but the affair may not have ended with this marriage. Rumors suggested that the two Carey children, Catherine and Henry, were fathered by the king. However, Henry never acknowledged them. Perhaps this was because, by the time Henry Carey was born, Henry had his eye on Anne Boleyn. Henry only admitted the affair because he required a dispensation for having a sexual relationship with his future bride's sister before he and Anne married. Mary Boleyn was quietly passed over and died in relative obscurity. Some may see her as a loser in love compared to her sister, but at least she kept her life. Number 6. Anne Boleyn won a crown and promoted the English Reformation before losing her head. None of Henry VIII's early love interests thought of being anything other than the king's mistress, but Anne Boleyn played a different game, one she eventually lost. Henry was charmed by Anne's wit, sophistication, and intelligence as much as her appearance. She used all to great effect, refusing to sleep with the king until he agreed to marry her. To acquire his divorce from his queen, Catherine of Aragon, Henry had to split with Rome. This and Anne's support for the reforming Protestant religion helped usher in the English Reformation. However, once married, Henry grew tired of Anne's spirited opinions. When she failed several times to give him a legitimate male heir, Henry got rid of her. Henry tried Anne for treason, divorced her, and then, for good measure, had her beheaded. Number 5. Lowborn Karen. Man's daughter married King Eric of Sweden and lost him the throne. By marrying his mistress, Henry VIII became something of a 16th century trendsetter. However, this arrangement did not work out so well for other monarchs. King Eric XIV of Sweden was an unstable, depressive, unable to contract a foreign marriage. Karen was 17 years Eric's junior and of peasant stock. However, her calming influence coupled with Eric's genuine love for her led to their marriage in 1568. Karen may have been a good influence on Eric, but her marriage to him did little for Sweden as it resulted in no wealth or alliances. So, after Karen had spent just 87 days as queen, Eric was deposed by the nobility and his heirs forced to forfeit the crown. Eric died in prison from poison in 1577. Karen, however, was given a small Finnish estate where she lived peacefully for the rest of her life. Number 4. Kosum Sultan was a Bosnian slave who became one of the most powerful women in Ottoman history. Kosum Sultan was a Greek-born slave who became a concubine of Sultan Ahmed I. Named Ma Paker or Moonface for her beauty, she was also called Kosum because of her smooth complexion. She so charmed the Sultan that by the time she was just 15, she had risen to become Ahmed's chief consort. Kosum gave birth to 4 sons and 3 daughters, which gave her an advantage over Ahmed's other wives. However, she was also a canny manipulator who became a political force in the 17th century Ottoman court. After Ahmed's death, Kosum acted as regent to her sons Murad IV and Ibrahim I and later her grandson Mehmed IV. After a 40-year career in politics, Mehmed's mother assassinated her. Number 3. Georgevilliers, 1st Duke of Buckingham, won his title by charming James I. As the second son of a minor country gentleman, Georgevilliers had few expectations in life. However, in 1614, he was introduced at the court of the first Stuart, King of England. James I and quickly caught the king's eye. The king's affection for George became a scandal. James openly hugged and kissed his young favorite, and began to promote him well beyond his capabilities. George became a baron, then a marquis, later an earl and finally Duke of Buckingham. In 1619, James even made him Lord High Admiral. This promotion, however, was a step too far. In 1628, Villiers was assassinated while at breakfast by an officer called John Felton. Felton murdered the Duke because he felt he had for so long gone unpunished for his military ineptitude. Number 2. Barbaravilliers won power and influence for herself and her friends, and founded several aristocratic dynasties. Barbaravilliers was one of Charles II of England's most long-standing mistresses, becoming the king's lover when he was in exile in Holland. She remained a prominent figure in Charles's life for 14 years. Barbara's love affair made her rich and powerful, and she used her position to benefit her friends and relatives. Barbara's husband received a peerage and became the Earl of Castlemaine as compensation for his cuckolding, and some of her friends became members of Charles's Privy Council. Charles also acknowledged 5 of Barbara's 7 children as his own, awarding them the surname Fitzroy and paying lavishly for their weddings. Those children became the founders of some of England's major noble families. Number 1. Louise de Keroualle was a royal mistress who reputedly was also a French spy. Louise de Keroualle met Charles II when in 1670 she accompanied her mistress and Charles's sister Henrietta, Duchess of Orleans, on a diplomatic mission to Dover. Henrietta died soon after the meeting, but Louise had made quite an impression on Charles. He wrote to Louis XIV of France and requested Louise come to England and serve as maid of honor to his wife, Catherine of Braganza. However, Louise was only allowed to go on the basis that she continued to serve the interests of France by reputedly spying on the English court. The gifts and honors from Louis appeared proof Louise was indeed a spy, and she became very unpopular with the English people. However, she remained one of Charles's mistresses until his death and bore him one son, Charles, Duke of Richmond.